In this White House statement today, you note the, quote, tragic grip of the pandemic, but under current U.S. sanctions that were put in place by the last administration, but have not been changed by this administration, Cuban exiles cannot send remittances to their family that lives in Cuba. So why is the Biden administration continuing that policy?
Well, I would say, again, even under the embargo, there are a number of exemptions, I should say, humanitarian assistance, medical supplies, that we've continued to provide assistance to the people of Cuba, even with that in place. But I have nothing to preview for you in terms of a change of policy.
But even though the president said he was going to reverse the policy, you can't say when he plans to reverse the policy?
Again, these protests happened yesterday, I think, or over the last 2 days.
He made the promise in September.
I certainly understand, Caitlin, but there's nothing I can preview for you.
The liberal sycophants in the mainstream media try once again to paint President Trump as a catalyst for chaos, this time blaming him for the outcry in Cuba. That so-called journalist is employed by none other than the fakest of all fake news outlets, shilling for CNN. Tens of thousands of Cubans took to the streets over the weekend, protesting against oppressive communist rule and calling for the end of the Castro regime. It's no surprise that Team Biden is just ignoring this latest crisis, saying a shift in policy regarding Cuba is not currently among Biden's top foreign policy priorities. Instead, the administration issued the following statement: "We stand with the Cuban people and their clarion call for freedom and relief from the tragic grip of the pandemic and from the decades of repression and economic suffering to which they have been subjected by Cuba's authoritarian regime. The Cuban people are bravely asserting fundamental and universal rights, those rights including the right of peaceful protest and the right to freely determine their own future, must be respected. The United States calls on the Cuban regime to hear their people and serve their needs at this vital moment rather than enriching themselves." Sounds perfectly rational and diplomatic from the leader of the free world. However, there are disturbing questions on whether Biden himself actually issued the statement. Now listen carefully as White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki exposes what's most likely going on behind the scenes in the Biden administration.
Ago, when asked about Cuba policy, you said it was not a priority for the president to review U.S. policy toward Cuba. Do the events of this weekend change that?
Well, I would say, Kelly, that we, of course, are monitoring closely. You saw the statement the president, we put out in the president's name this morning, in his voice, of course, conveying his support for the people of Cuba, making clear that he doesn't support the approach of the government of Cuba, which he has never held back on.
A statement we put out in the president's name, in his voice? What exactly does that mean, Psaki? Any rational person can clearly see that Biden isn't calling the shots. He needs note cards, after all, to remember the simplest talking points. But now the White House is confirming it? Was it a simple slip of the tongue, or a revelation of something much more sinister and a dire threat to our national security? Who's in charge, Jen Psaki? I hope it doesn't take too long for you to circle back and confirm that Biden is the head of the executive branch. We'll all be waiting. Joining me now, Representative for Florida's 17th Congressional District, Congressman Greg Steube. Mr. Congressman, again, who is running the country right now?
Well, we all know that Joe Biden's not running the country. He doesn't even know what's going on. Press will ask him questions at the ice cream shop, and he's fumbling through his pocket for note cards to try to answer the question, and then responds, well, they didn't put that answer in my note cards. We know he's not in charge. So that's a great question. Who's in charge of the free world right now? Who's the one in charge of our military? Who's the one making executive decisions as it relates to everything in executive agencies? Because it's not Joe Biden. So that's a great question to pose to the White House, and I hope that we'll soon get answers to that at Congress.
And how do you like that the press and the Democrats are running with this narrative that what's happening in Cuba, it's President Trump's fault? Biden actually campaigned on reversing President Trump's policies. Of course, Obama was such big friends with the dictator there, going to baseball games. Here again, they're trying to rewrite history and blame the last administration.
Well, we know that everything has been Trump's fault, even since he's been out of office. During the 4 years that he was president, everything was Trump's fault. COVID was Trump's fault. Everything was Trump's fault. And then even though he's been out of office for more than 6 months, everything's still Trump's fault. So the mainstream media, when they know that the issue is bad and the liberal left and the Democrats don't have an actual policy answer, they have to blame either COVID or President Trump for the things that are going on in this country.
Well, and it's scary to think because that deep state establishment, especially when you talk about military and foreign policy, they fought President Trump every step of the way, but he ultimately prevailed because he knew where he was going policy-wise. It was America first. With Biden, he's not calling the shots, so that deep state is crafting foreign policy, even in terms of pulling out of the endless wars. They're messing that up when President Trump had it positioned so well.
Well, that's because Biden is pressured by the progressive woke left of his party. And where is the Democratic Socialist parties, the Bernie Sanders, the AOCs, the Cory Bush? Where are they talking about right now? They're remaining completely silent with what's going on in Cuba because they know that the people there want freedom, and the people there are clamoring. They don't even have food. They don't have health care. They don't have all these things because they're under a communist regime. And that doesn't help their talking points here in America because they want America to be a socialist, communist nation.
Well, and here Black Lives Matter had just said that the American flag was a racist symbol. And here you have the people of Cuba flying the American flag. We saw it even in Hong Kong during those protests. The American flag is a symbol for freedom. But right now in America, they're saying, no, that's a symbol of Trumpism. And somehow that's a terrible thing for people to want freedom.
Yeah, we're in a dangerous place in our country right now when people are saying that it's the United States that is racist. It's the United States that is too far gone. There's all of these problems in our country, yet you have Cubans in Cuba waving the American flag, and it's because they stand for freedom and they want what we have in the United States. All you have to do is go down to Miami and talk to the Cubans that have fled the Castro regime to know that socialism doesn't work, communism doesn't work, and they will tell you that because they fled that regime to come to freedom and come to the United States. We need to stand with the Cuban people. We need to stand for freedom, and we need to stand for liberty, and the Biden administration is not doing that right now.
And that's what the Democrats are afraid of, is simply the fact that we're talking about socialism, we're talking about communism when it's actually implemented in a country. That's why President Trump did so well with the people of Florida, the people of Cuba who'd fled that regime. They know what it looks like to start implementing those socialist policies, which the Biden administration is doing right now.
Yeah, if you see the numbers of Hispanics and Latinos supporting Republicans, especially in the state of Florida, where we have a large Hispanic and Latino population, it's because of those policies. We stand for freedom and free markets and your ability to have the American dream, not for socialism, not for defunding the police, not for communism, which is what the Democratic left stands for right now. And Joe Biden's in a tough position because he has these far left progressives like AOC and Bernie Sanders clamoring socialism from the rooftops. So they have to balance that, which is why you're not seeing a strong reaction to what the Cuban people want, which is freedom and liberty. And we need to stand with them. They need to know that America is behind them.
We stand with them 100%. President Trump even issued a statement so strong on this because we're not seeing a strong response at all. It's just always words and platitudes that we see from the Democrats, when in reality, they endorse a lot of the same policies. And that's what they're afraid of us talking about. Mr. Congressman, thank you for the good work you're doing in Washington. Again, it's not easy fighting against socialism, even in our own country, but keep up the good work.